Hello, ladies and gents. This is Jayme Blasiman, the host of the Femcanic Garage podcast. Welcome to the 5-part series of the dirty little secrets in the automotive and skilled trades industries. This blog series is brought to you by Chasidy Rae Sisk Writing and Communication and Femcanic Garage. We have interviewed industry experts on topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're excited to share their knowledge and experience with all of you. Now let's get started. This week, we are covering stereotypes, and we have Lori Johnson in the hot seat. Lori's been in the automotive industry for over 30 years and is the owner of Ladies Start Your Engines. Her roles include technician, service writer, service manager, and automotive college instructor. As if all of that is not impressive enough, she has contributed to editing the Chilton automotive repair manuals and ASE study guides. She owns and operates Ladies Start Your Engines, which offers an opportunity for ladies to learn more about their vehicles in a non-threatening environment. As you can probably imagine, over a 30-year career, Lori has seen and experienced all sorts of stereotyping. Now let's dive in and learn from her. Hello everyone, this is Jayme B, and I have Lori in the hot seat today, and Chaz and I are having a little bit of fun in interviewing some of the key experts in our industry for our own selfish learning, but also to share their wealth of knowledge with all of you. So, Lori, thanks for being here. Thanks for accepting our invitation and talking about these topics that sometimes aren't talked about but need to be talked about. And we reached out to you to focus on a specific topic, and that is stereotypes. So thank you for accepting our invitation.
Sure. Great. Thanks for having me.
So where do we get started on this stereotypes thing? And it's interesting because Femcanic Garage's intro in the core of what Femcanic Garage is about is breaking down stereotypes. And in the automotive industry, like many other industries, there are a lot of stereotypes that can be tagged. In the automotive and skilled trades industry, boy, if you're a woman in the industry, there are a lot of stereotypes that are tagged to it. I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, you are a mechanic. A lot of people have figured that out from the pre-recorded bio. But there's stereotypes for you as a mechanic. But then I imagine with your years of experience that you've also observed stereotypes from a customer's standpoint, not only within your peers within the industry. Has that been the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the stereotypes, even though technology has gotten better, and so the techs need to be trained so much more. I mean, you can't just be somebody who worked in the backyard and come and work in a shop because of the technology. I still think that there is a huge feeling out there that techs are they're dirty, they're not smart. This is something you do if you don't have any other career choice. Let's put the kids that are troublemakers in there. I think that's starting to go away in the school so much because they know in the school system that's not the place. They're not going to survive. But yeah, it's really interesting that you could pay as much as you pay a doctor anymore to get your car fixed, but yet they still think that we're not educated or that we're kind of hacks, or I don't know. And that's not every place, don't get me wrong, but I think if you ask the general public, that's not an ideal career.
And that's a good call out because that's oftentimes where the troublemaker kids are sent, right? The shop classes, the mechanics, and it's just not, cars are becoming less and less, air quotes, mechanical and more computer. And it's really evolving into a STEM field. And that's one of the things that I think we need to educate people on is that this is STEM related more and more all the time. But I'm curious, as a female, what have been some of the stereotypes that you've run into? and observed.
So, personally, like about women being in the
Yeah.
job. So, there's always well, first of all, I'm only 5 foot tall. So there's that. And they are like, you're too little to do this, or so there's that. But there's always been you're not strong enough. Like, how are you going to do that work? And as you know, when you get in the industry, there are tools to do everything. So it's not like I can't do the work. I might have to do it different than you, but I'm going to do it. Of course, there's always why would a girl want to do this? Like, it's dirty work. How you're not going to look good. You're going to have like dirt under your nails. You're not going to be able to stay clean, and those kind of things. I think there's also the feeling that girls aren't smart enough to do this, in the sense of, you don't understand this kind of thing. It's mechanical. You don't understand how these things work. So those are just some things, like, kind of off the top of my head that I can think of.
Have you ever experienced anything from a customer? Like, where they walk in and they see you? Well, one, to your point, you're 5 foot, right? You're a petite female. Have you ever received any kind of comments that kind of lend themselves to, like, leaving you scratching your head, like, where would that even come from?
Yeah, I had a customer when I was working I used to work for a Honda dealership, and the customer brings the car in and it's given to the tech, and they don't see who's working on it for the most part. I mean, they are sitting in the waiting room, and the customer came in with a complaint about a radio, and the radio was the new digital type. And this was an older gentleman, and he was used to the old, where you could tune it yourself and turn that dial. And, those days were gone. So it was much harder to tune in to the station you wanted to listen to. You just kind of rely on that digital button. So he was complaining that he couldn't get some of his stations as clear anymore. So I did a whole check over the vehicle, and I really couldn't find anything wrong. So when it came time to talk to the customer, they had me come out and talk to him. Well, you can imagine the look on his face. He's an older man. He sees me. He's like, yeah, well, who was working on the car, kind of thing. I could see that look in his eye. And so I told him, what I did. And I said, basically, everything's working fine. You're just going to have to get used to it. There is no way to really tune in like you used to. And he said to me, okay, he said, I'd like to have a male tech look at it. And I just, you're standing there and it's like, okay. I mean, you don't even know what to say to something like that. I just I stood there and I looked at him and I said, absolutely, we'll get someone for you. And I went and got the service writer, and he grabbed a tech, and they went and looked at it. And the interesting part was, I went back to work, whatever. And I thought, I'm kind of used to this kind of experience. I mean, I know how they look at me. I know what they think. So, but this is the first time that somebody had actually asked right in front of me. So I went back to work, and it wasn't probably 15 minutes later, and I saw him coming over, and he asked if he could talk to me. And he actually said to me, he said, you know what, I just wanted to come over and apologize. He said, the male tech who looked at the car said this very same thing as you did. And he also said that you were a good tech, and that, he should have taken my word for it at the beginning. So it was a good outcome, because the guy learned a lesson, and he did come and say something back to me, which I thought was nice, because a lot of times you don't get that.
I listen to these stories, and, like, as I'm sitting here feeling what I'm feeling as you share that story, Lori, I go through these different emotions, right? Like, you're telling the story, and he says, well, I want to see a male tech. I want to have a male tech look at it. And I feel anger, right? And then you go through, and like, I felt this range of emotions when you're sharing this story. But there's this other thing that I feel that women struggle with more than men. And I don't have scientific proof, although I'm sure Chaz will be able to go look something up and find it to support it. But we struggle with our worthiness and imposter syndrome anyway as women, more so than men. And I hear stories like that, right? And it's more common than what I think a lot of people realize. And it's not necessarily every single day that happens, right? I have never heard anyone say, you know what? I don't want a man to look at this. I want a woman, right? Women don't hear that. Men certainly don't hear that, right? So there's like this battle, this internal battle anyway that we have. And then you have those situations that fuel the fire of that self-doubt. And I'm not saying you had self-doubt, but it's real easy for women in this industry to slip into that.
Right. I mean, for a minute when they were going to give it to another tech, I thought, oh, great. He's going to find something. And then it's just going to propel this whole idea that this woman didn't know anything. Where if it had been another male tech and they just wanted somebody else, it would just be like, oh, well, he just didn't find it. But for me, it would have been, this huge thing put on like, oh, see, it's a woman. She doesn't know what she's doing. And so I think that's part of the fear. And that's why we do so much to prepare ourselves to get into the industry. We do school. And I would have never walked into that job saying, oh, yeah, I worked on cars in the backyard and I want a job.
But that's not uncommon for men to do that.
Right, exactly. But I knew.
To pull up in their old car and say, look what I work on.
Right. So I knew I had to be prepared. But yeah, there are still times when something like that happens and part of me questions, and it just, it takes back all those insecurities like, okay, well, do I really know that? Or have I misdiagnosed it? And not to realize that happens all the time in the industry. It's not like it's a genetic thing, a female is more prone to do it than a man. It's just that we're held to a higher standard.
Yeah, it's almost like microscope. There's one other thing that I want to call out in the story that you just shared. And what I find is the best teachers or the best lessons are often through experiences and stories. But there's another key thing in the story that you just shared. And this all ties into stereotypes. How do we debunk and break down these stereotypes? But the fact that your peer also gently and sounds like in a professional way, put the customer in his place. Right? Mm-hmm. And, there's a lot of men who have asked me, like, hey, you've interviewed a lot of women. What are the themes? What are the things? I want to support women in this industry. How do I do that? What do I do? There's a perfect example, right? He could have easily just left it as, I don't see anything. But he didn't. Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean by this change and this evolution in our industry that has to happen isn't just about women. It's about all of us working together. Chaz, right. You look like you got something, like you're like,
I do.
Come on, bring it, girl.
Like, it's just such a great point, Jayme, because seriously, like, that same guy, if Lori had gone up to that customer and said, excuse me, but I have this much experience, he wouldn't have cared. He already has that mindset. But to have another man step in, they're going to listen to the guys. It is what it is, but that the guys like that do stand up for us, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Can the rest of you step up your game?
Yeah, it becomes the uniform.
And there's that whole look. There's that whole look too. Like I said, I could tell when I walked out there, he was not expecting. I'm sure he was looking around like, well, where's the person that's going to tell me about my car? It can't be this little young thing here, this female that's going to tell me. But I do have to say that when I was at the dealership, I worked there for about 7 or so years, I guess, that I kind of had a following from the women who came in. They would come in and ask where I was. And so the men were kind of getting huffy about it. It was kind of funny because the service writers, because they would come over and they'd be like, you're getting, all these women are asking for you. And I said, well, maybe if you spoke to them in a different way, they would feel more comfortable with you. I said, but they're obviously coming to me because they feel comfortable. So that's not on me. And it was just kind of funny because sometimes they would get like a diagnosis and they would come find me and ask me. They're like, what do you think of this? Which I thought was great. But most of the time it was just to explain it more. And so that was the kind of stuff I told the guys. I'm like, you need to figure out a way to talk to them and explain it and not feel like, you're this superior being and they don't need to understand. They just need to be told this is what has to be done.
You don't need to posture that way. It's just not needed.
Right.
And this kind of seems like a logical lead into Ladies Start Your Engine. And I love what you've done with that. I'm going to have you share a little bit about it because the viewers may or may not know or have heard of Ladies Start Your Engine. And the viewers may or may not know or have heard of Bogey Leitner. But Chaz and I had the opportunity to go to a happy hour at SEMA where you attended, Bogey hosted. And for those of you who may or may not know Bogey's on Motor Trend Network, All Girls Garage, and Garage Squad as well. And she literally showcased you, pulled you to the front of the table, and made an announcement about and wanted to make sure every woman that was there understood that you were one of the biggest inspirations to her because of these classes that you had started, and it inspired her to want to do the same thing. Now, you're on the East Coast. She's out west in Arizona. So it just goes to show this is not about scarcity mentality. We need more women doing this. Just because there's multiple women doing it doesn't mean we don't need more doing it, right? And one, what did that feel like for you to receive that from Bogey? And two, if you could jump into Ladies Start Your Engine and help people understand what it is.
Yeah, so Bogey, she always cracks me up when she tells that story because I just feel so, I don't know, I feel like, and I think she would tell you the same thing. We both went into this career not to be like this speaker and a mentor. And, we both went into it thinking, well, we enjoy doing this kind of thing. This will be, fun. And then, of course, probably every woman gets to a point when they work in the industry of you're either going to take ownership of this because there's like 2.9% women are technicians in the world still today. I mean, it's crazy. We're a very, very small percentage. And so you end up being a voice because you almost don't have a choice. You can't just go to work today and just do your job. People are going to recognize you. They're going to see you. They're going to ask you questions, that kind of thing. So Bogey and I met in, I guess it was 2009 or something like that. We actually met in person, and we realized we were doing the same thing. We teach, I think we teach pretty much the same type of class, and we just really, talked about the things that we were doing. And I never thought of myself as being, this this woman who other people would like look up to and talk about later. I mean, I just think that it's funny, and especially Bogey. I mean, she's such a high profile now, and it's really an honor for me to have her speak that way about me, because I tell you right now, she has so many more letters after her name she's much more master tack, all that kind of thing, which I never really pursued in that sense. But I think the important thing is both of us never forget to look back, because there are women in the industry that are coming up that need that somebody to see that's doing it and to be able to talk to, or we can help them because now we've been through. So it's just her way of also helping me, because it gets word out about my business and what I'm doing, because she has that platform, and I so appreciate that she does that. And, we've stayed friends all these years, even though we don't spend a lot of time together. I constantly follow what she's doing and stay up on what's going on. So yeah, it was a great feeling. It's always kind of embarrassing, and like people, say stuff about like that kind of stuff about you. But anytime anybody introduces me and they say all this stuff that I've done, I'm like, wow, you kind of forget about like all these different things that I've done. And, I've earned this position. I've been in the industry for over 30 years. I've done a lot. And I do know people, they might not know my name, but they'll go, oh, you're that lady, start your engines, and I'm like, yes. And so that's all that matters to me, because then we can start a conversation. But to get to your point about how this whole thing started was that when I worked at the dealership, we had new customers would come in after they bought their car, and we would have kind of a class for them on, basic things about their car. So they'd know like when they should get their car maintained and how, oil changes and that kind of thing. And we put a car up on the lift, and there was a guy, and it just happened to be that same guy that told the customer about me. He was just a really great guy. He and I worked together to do this class. He talked about the cars underneath the car. We'd put it up in a lift, and everybody wants to get underneath. So we had quite a different people came, men, women, older, younger, anybody who wanted to kind of learn about their car. And I noticed right away that the men were right up underneath there and they're asking questions, and the women are kind of standing back, and they didn't seem to really participate in the class. And I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. And so I kind of stepped back, I think, to some of them, and I said, well, do you have any questions? Is there anything? And they would ask me, but they wouldn't go right up and ask the question there. So a few years went on, I left the dealership and I started working at the community college in Philadelphia, which has a 2-year degree automotive program. And I was working in that, and they were looking for a class to teach for like adult education. So, a one-time class. And one of the people there was like, I think it's great what you do. Would you teach a class just for women? And I thought, that's a great idea. Let's do that. I'll put together like a 2-hour class, and I'll just teach them, like light maintenance. So they kept saying to me, well, we need a name for it. We need a name for it. And I said, just put ladies start your engines, whatever. So funny, and people loved it. So I did the class, and it was just amazing. I mean, the women were so responsive. They came with like notepads. They were taking notes. They were asking good questions. If at first they didn't participate, I make them answer. I'd be like, come on, you know this. You've heard this before. And then my typical thing is I start spelling it because they eventually will figure it out. But it got them to talk. And then I asked them, I said, if there were men here, and they said, oh, no, we wouldn't ask questions because they know so much more. We don't want to look stupid in front of them.
Stereotype.
And I said, well, what is...
Right? Stereotype.
Yeah, right. And I said, would it help if I told you they don't? They just know how to act like they do. And you're totally capable of doing that as well. So I'm going to give you some keywords that you're going to use the next time you go in to have your car worked on. And you don't even have to know what they mean. I'm going to tell you what they mean, but if you forget, but you just remember, I should ask this question, those people are going to look at you in a very different way because they're not going to feel like they can just, I can just sell them this. But wait a minute, they ask about torquing the wheels. Yikes, I better make sure that, that how much more do they know? So that's kind of what the class turned into. And then it became a class for Girl Scouts because they do a car care badge. And, it's just kind of grown to all kinds of groups, schools, colleges, industries who they're women. They have women drivers. Like I worked with a hospice company that they have women drivers that are out driving to people's homes, and they wanted them to feel safe and learn some more about their car. So it's, it really just turned into like, hey, I could make some money doing this. How is that? And so it's been going on since 2006.
Wow. And you bring up a good point through that. The topic is stereotypes, but stereotypes go both ways, right?
Correct.
I know a lot of men who don't know anything about cars, and nor do they want to. And that's okay, right? That's interesting. That is really interesting. So there are a couple things that I would like to ask, but before I do that, I want to give Chaz an opportunity because I saw her come off mute.
I did. I just wanted to comment on Lady Searcher Engine since I got the opportunity to actually come and watch Lori teach one of these classes, and it made my heart so happy. There were so many teenage girls there, and you not only showed them what to do, you had them doing different techniques, and made sure that you rotated through, like, who's next? Come on, put your hands on it. Get that experience. And not to harp on how short you are, but you are. I'm rarely the tallest person in a group, so feeling strange. You use that to your advantage in your class too. Like, okay, sometimes this doesn't work. Here's how you do it. Like, put your weight into it. And I mean, to me personally, there are things that I saw you do that I would have never thought that I could do because of my size. And I'm watching you, who you're like 3 or 4 inches shorter than me. I'm like, I can do that. I just haven't got around to it yet, but it's definitely inspirational. So I think that's awesome. And I love that you're working with the younger generation and inspiring that love for this industry in them already.
Lori, I'm just curious with stereotypes, and part of this is understanding different ways in how to handle those situations. So you've shared multiple examples throughout this conversation and stories. If you were sitting down and talking to men or women, right? How would you recommend handling? Now, you shared how you handled those situations, but 2020 hindsight, right? Hindsight's 2020, and looking back,
Right.
and kind of thinking through this, and if you had to sum up your experience and what you feel is the best way to handle those situations, what would you tell other people around those best practices?
I think that there were many times where I think I just kind of nodded and walked away. And I think I'm less prone to do that today. I'd like to, I don't want to demean them for saying stuff. I don't want to say something back in anger because it really doesn't help the situation. But usually I start a conversation. And I'll just say to them, well, why do you feel like I can't do that? Or why would you say something like that? And also say to them, I want to have an understanding. I want to know why you're thinking that, because maybe we can come to a different conclusion. And this will help the next time you think that thought, to say it to somebody. I mean, isn't that really what it's about? If somebody is able to make these comments to women or to men or to anyone, if you keep doing it and you don't ever get asked why, or you don't ever get confronted, then you just continue to do it. I mean, it's no different than, like, I remember many times I like to work with my hands, so I'm constantly doing stuff. I put cabinets in my kitchen and that kind of stuff. So I'm in the Home Depot, I'm in the, or the Lowe's or wherever, in one of those aisles where I'm in like plumbing, or I'm doing something where, and I can't tell you, when my back's to the person and I hear them coming, they're like, "Can I help you, sir?" I mean, "Ma'am," So there's also those stereotypes of like, why are you even in this aisle? Like, did somebody tell you to come here and get something? Or can I help you, little lady? Or, those kind of things. And so,
Can I help you, little lady?
I love to have conversations. Yeah. After they realize, then they, you turn around, they're like, "Oh, what?" But I think having a conversation, and sometimes it goes nowhere. Sometimes people are just so ingrained that you shouldn't be doing this, and there's a fear. And I don't understand that fear. I don't understand if they feel like, if we start letting women in, they're all going to come and work here. You know what I think?
Good.
No, they're
And
not.
if they do, awesome.
Right. Right. Yeah, like this is the last male place that we can be, because we talk a certain way here and we hang up these calendars and we can't do that if you're here. So where can we go if this goes away? So, maybe that's their fear. I don't know what it is.
But I think the key thing you said there is starting a conversation, right? And that can be the scariest part. But I think what I'm interpreting from what you're saying, Lori, is get curious and just ask questions. And
They don't expect it. They really don't. If you turn to them and you say, why would you say something like that? And then they don't know what to say because they're caught off guard and nobody's ever asked them before. They just get mad at them and walk away.
I have actually done that before. And they're just like what you said. They're caught off guard. They're kind of dumbfounded. And man or woman. I can't even remember the situation. I just remember how I felt, right? And I was kind of hurt and frustrated by it. And I just got curious and asked, why did you say that? Or what do you mean by that? Tell me more. Right?
Right.
And I dropped into this place of just pure curiosity. And they were good people, right? It's not like they were a bad person or anything like that.
Right.
And literally 2 days later, they came back to me and said, you know what? I've been thinking about what you asked me, and I want to share this with you. And it gave us a whole nother level of connectiveness, and it enabled us to work on a project at a level that we just never would have been able to do had I just simply not asked, because they had never been asked. Therefore, they were never in the place of having to explore self-awareness around it. And it turned out it was just tired old stuff from the environment that they grew up in. Like phrases and things that they would say, it's kind of like oh, you run like a girl, right? Those types of phrases that, if I'm being honest, I say stuff like that. Or, hey guys, and it's a room full of women. You know what I mean? There's these silly little phrases and things that we do that we say that we don't even think about, and it's just because we grew up around it. And it's just, in a non-attacking way, just asking why? And, there's this post that I did on Instagram, Lori, where there's this young girl, God, I'd have to go back and look. It's on my Instagram feed, where she's young. I want to say like 11, maybe. And she was running 11 or 12 miles an hour or something like, I don't know. It was like a crazy speed for anyone, not alone an 11-year-old. And I remember reposting it and saying, yes, I run like a girl. and it's like, let's start redefining that. You know what I mean? So I want to thank you for being willing to explore this topic, but more importantly, share your own personal experiences and stories and that vulnerability around that. Because that's what this whole segment's about in interviewing interviewing experts like yourself. It's teaching other people different ways on how to handle these tough situations, because it's tough. And Chaz, have I missed anything? I want to say I missed one thing, and I believe it's the quote, right?
It is, though actually I wanted to touch on, so Lori has established herself as a mechanic who spends a lot of time in Home Depot and Lowe's. So, some pretty stereotypically masculine things. But you also have a pretty stereotypically feminine hobby as well, because you don't fit in a box. Can you tell us about that?
So I love to cook. My first job starting, as a worker when I was younger was in kitchens. And so I did a lot of, I never worked on the line, but I worked in a lot of the areas in the kitchen. So I learned to love to cook. And then I've always been like a bread baker. I love that. If anybody, I have a KitchenAid, I have yes. So I have to say, I started with a bread machine, where you put everything in and then you come back and hours later there's a loaf of bread. Well, I did that twice, which is so typical of me. And then I was like, okay, there's got to be more to this. I'll let it rise in there and then I can take it out and do what I want with it, So then that moved up to the KitchenAid. Now I make everything, by hand.
Lori, I just have to say that's an art form. Baking is not my thing. It is truly an art form.
Every time in the kitchen, I think I'm going to burn the whole house down. So
Well, so here's the thing: when you just to cook, when you're just cooking, you can just throw whatever you want in. And so my first kind of steps into baking were, oh yeah, I'm sure I could just add a little more of this. Well, that does not work. I learned early on that you've got to follow that recipe. There's a reason why it's baking soda and not baking powder, or whatever you have on hand. So. So anyway, I work at this out of a co-working space here in Lancaster, and I was making some stuff at home, and I thought, wow, I'm not going to eat all this. I'll bring it in. So it started this whole thing, and actually at the end of this month, it'll be a year since I started every Monday bringing in something. And King Arthur is a flour. If you bake, King Arthur. And they started a contest during COVID called the Extraordinary Breads. And there were 11 of them. And what attracts me to baking is the challenge. So I'm not making just like, hey, let me open the box of brownies. I do that, don't get me wrong. But I'm like, hey, so what do I need to make brownies from scratch? So I did 4 of the Extraordinary Breads, which were, you have to go look them up because they're really kind of cool. Then I started bringing that stuff in. Well, then it just became expected. So now I am...
Expected as in they love it and
making...
want more of it is what you're saying?
Yes. And, I almost always when I make something, I taste it before I take it somewhere to make sure it's okay. But you can't really cut a piece of bread off, and take it in and then be like, oh, I tried it last night. It doesn't look aesthetically pleasing with that piece cut off. So I really just bring everything in and nothing's happened yet. Everything has been good. But so I'm a gardener, and I also make like my sauces from my tomatoes that I grow, and I'm really into all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I have but yet if you think about it, that's still a hands-on thing. So it's still in the genre of what I'm doing. It's just, you're right. That would be looked at more stereotypical as female. But when you look at some of the big chefs, you don't see a lot of women. You see them as, men. So, but people still think if you said you were a baker or a cooker, they think of a woman, I think.
I would agree.
So, I think one of the things that, Bogey and I still talk about today is why haven't these things changed? Why hasn't the stereotype about women? In some areas, women they have moved up so much, doctors and lawyers. We're seeing so many more women, and it's starting to become more accepted. Although one of my best friends is a lawyer, and, there are still things that happen to her as well. But
statistically, there's a lot more women in other industries, and you can see, I guess, a steeper trajectory around it. But we just...
And it's more likely to change the stereotype. Obviously, if we have more women there, then there's less of the men to say anything about it. And I think that's why this industry stays where it is, because we have a harder time getting women into the industry. And then because there's fewer of us, there's still so many more of them that they feel they can make these comments or, still kind of push back.
Or even feel a little awkward going against their male counterparts since there's more of them.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Lori, and I had an opportunity to walk with you after Bogey's thing. We walked together back towards our hotel rooms, and you blew my mind with a cake in a vending machine. I'm never going to forget that, my friend. That is a beautiful thing. Yeah. But I look forward to getting to know you even better and calling you my friend, not only a peer in this industry, but bringing you into other projects as well, because we all have similar values. Chaz, me, you, we're all doing this our way with our own voices to reach out to as many women and men as possible to really move this needle. And you're certainly doing your part. And I just want to say thank you for being you, because being in this industry 30 years, correct me if I'm wrong, right? 30 years. You think
More, actually,
okay.
but we're not talking about that.
You think back 30 years. We weren't even at 2.9% 30 years ago. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
the thing that I tell all women, our number, how we move this needle right now is by simply you keep showing up. That is the most important thing. You have to keep showing up. And then the men have to join in with us, right? But if we're not there and we don't keep showing up, it doesn't force anyone to have a conversation. So thank you for
Correct.
being so diligent and you kept showing up. I so appreciate that.
Well, and thank you too, because I think it's really important that the people who can be vocal and reach out are also just as important, because I can only do so much, and I only have a passion to do so much. I want to teach classes. That's what I'm good at. I like to teach, but I'm not going to start my own podcast, or I'm not going to start. So we need all of the women who are interested in helping, form a group, should I say, and we need to stick together, and we need to keep getting the word out, and we need to really support all the other women. Like I go in my Instagram account and I just try to click on women who are racing, women who are working as plumbers, women who are working anything in the trades or in male-dominated fields. I think it's so important to follow them, to comment on what they're doing, to share them with other people, because that's how we're seen. If you're not in the racing industry, you might not know that there's all these women who are doing that. And so I try to look at all those different traditions that would typically not be female driven, and to support those women. And so I think having a podcast, a show, a website like you do, really helps to get those women's voices out. And I think that's really important as well.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks, Lori. It's always a pleasure getting to see you and hear from you. And I'm glad that you joined us for this.
Thanks for watching. By being open to learning more about these topics, you are fueling a movement that creates a safer and more inclusive environment for women in our industry. And for that, we thank you. It's up to all of us to keep this conversation alive. The only way to rid the industry of the darkness is to shine light on it. The entire 5-part blog series of the dirty little secrets of the automotive and skilled trades industries can be found on ChasidyRaeSisk.com and Femcanic.com. Until next time, my friends.